Hi and welcome to Homo Ludens, the channel on history and board games. Two things. First of all, I'm sorry if we're a bit late. That was completely on me. I derailed the discussion with Adam as I was showing him my latest project, game design project, and I didn't. And I got distracted, and I was supposed to check for technical things. But now we're live. Almost not late at all, and I'm very happy to have with me tonight Adam, the designer of Echo from the Dark, but also you were the developer of Red Dust Rebellion. And I thought it would be quite exciting to have you on the show to talk about your work at GMT in terms of development, but also in terms of design, but also maybe about game design in general. Like we were having a super interesting discussion before the stream about video games, and I think that could be like really interesting to see how the two connect, where you came from when it comes to game design and what kind of influence it has in your work on the board game space. But first of all, Adam, thanks a lot for being here.
You're very welcome. Yeah, it's very nice to be here. Got my modules all updated from a rules update that I did like a couple of weeks ago. So we're trying to make sure that playtesters are in a good spot. I also wanted to comment that I am also the developer on Shinjuku, a very important train game that
I'll keep you talking about it. Keep talking about it, and I'll be back in a sec.
Sure. So my game design group has been working on stuff for about 15 years now. I think we really got started around 2010. And one of the big games that we worked on for quite a long time is a Tokyo train game that I'm really proud of as we got out. So right now the only copy's in Japanese, but you can get English paste ups. And I think it's relatively public that there's going to be another copy printed in Europe this year. But unless Gary's on the chat, then
I thought it was announced a while back already. So
it's always tricky. Yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing
So I don't
exactly
want to say
what's
something
public.
that we're not supposed to say, but
Yeah.
but yeah, I think it's I think it has been announced, and I've been waiting for this in a box for quite a while. I remember that Gary showed to me, I think during COVID,
Yeah.
and I was super excited about it, and I was like, oh, and he told me, oh, it's gonna come soon and everything, and I was like I think every 6 months I was sending an email to Gary, and I was like, so what's up? But it eventually came here, and I'm super excited to actually see the release in English. But it's a very very fun game. Do you know how well it did in Japan?
Yeah, I mean, it's sold out in like the first week, I think. I mean, the problem is they did a relatively small print run because they were only going to be selling it in Tokyo, and so it sold out. But Gary is very pessimistic about whether that means it did really well or not. We're certainly hopeful that it'll do well outside. I know we had this guy whose channel is Cardboard East, who said it was his favorite game that came out this last year, which was exciting.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we think it did pretty well. But I mean, you're never gonna make all of your money as a game designer, I think is what we are aware of.
It's tricky, and like to Gary's point, when your game goes out of stock really soon, you are conflicted because on one hand you're thinking, wow, that's really cool, it did really well, but on the other you're like, we should have printed more copies because now sending another batch is another risk, and will the audience still be there? Shouldn't we have just printed 1,000 or 2,000 more when we had the opportunity? And it's just very frustrating. So I know I know the feeling, but it's cool that it's already being released in another language and opening to a new audience. So that's a really cool thing. I really hope that it's going to do well for Gary and you, obviously. But I think it's a great game, and I just want more people to play it.
Our joke is that since it's going to get released in Europe this year, that means we're eligible for the Spiel des Jahres. But
no, so to be eligible to Spiel, you need to have a German version. And do you know if there will be a German version of it?
I don't know, and yeah, I'm not totally sure. Trying to keep myself on the only public information train at the moment.
Okay.
It wouldn't surprise me if there was a German version. Let's.
I think it would make sense that in a European version you would have maybe 2 or 3 version of the rulebook, like English, German, and something like French or yeah. that would
Yeah,
make a lot of sense. But anyway, pretty exciting stuff. But I think it's already interesting because we see the range of the different stuff that you're working on. So Shinjuku is a kind of a weird train game. Like there is kaiju in it, so it's not just your regular train game. Red Dust Rebellion was the first sci-fi coin game, so a coin game, but still with a sci-fi theme. And now, actually, in the Irregular Conflicts series, you have currently on P500 a game called Echo from the Dark, which is, I guess, inspired by some aspects of the coin system, but in a very different setting and with a very different dynamic. So it looks like you are a bit of an oddity within the space of GMT designers. So how did you end up working with GMT?
Oh, there's a lot behind that. So I'm a big fan of GMT in general because we worked on a lot of games. Because when I got back into board gaming as a hobby in 2005, 6, 7, something around there, a lot of the work that I was doing at that time was, can we find something a little bit deeper between my wife and I, who were she was my main board gaming partner at the time. And so I think one of the big games that was on the top of BGG at the time was Twilight Struggle. It was #1 for a little while. So we're like, let's check this thing out and see if it's any good. I think she still considers it one of her favorite games. I like it a lot still. It's an astounding piece of work. And that from there, I'm like, the interesting thing here is both the historical side of stuff, but also the amount of depth you can get out of honestly, a relatively simple rule set. You're going to play cards, you're going to take some action points, you're going to do some stuff. So after diving in pretty hard to the GMT catalog, I guess, I started going to their convention, which they do every October, and they also do one every April. Down in California, it's not too bad of a drive for me, not too bad of a flight for me. And one time I was down there with and spent some time hanging out with Jason Carr, who now runs development. But at the time, he was just showing up and hanging out and playing war games. And I got to talk to him and Bruce Mansfield, who was working on Gandhi at the time. And they were playing around with this new card-based bot system. And it's not, the convention's like 100 people. It's not too hard to show up and just, insert yourself into a conversation. They sent me off to do some software engineering work to kind of get out of their hair. So I wrote up a system so that you could track what cards you actually saw in the bot, figure out which ones actually got used, which branches never got triggered. And as now I'm talking to a lot of people in that group because it's relatively straightforward. And Volko put out a call on, at that point, Twitter for some who wants to develop for some new sci-fi coin game. And I'm like, well, that sounds like fun.
Yeah.
This is August 2019, I think. And at that time, I had been doing a bunch of development in my local group for a while. So I'm like, well, I know about what this looks like. I had no idea what that looked like. It's very different doing it for a company and a producer than a couple of people doing it as their hobby, right?
But I think it's still interesting, like the story that you tell, because I can totally relate to it and how accessible the hobby can be. Like a lot of people asked me when Red Flag Over Paris was released, how did you end up being being published by GMT? And I was like, well, there is literally no secret. I just sent them an email and they said, yeah, cool. And I showed them a prototype. They said it looks interesting. And then they said, oh, there is a game that we are currently on P500 and we'd like you to do some playtest on. And it was South China Sea. And I was like, okay, cool. It's not that different from what I'm trying to do. I'm going to play this. I'm going to give some feedbacks to Harold and stuff like this. And like stuff snowballed from there. And like a couple of months later, I was on P500 and that's pretty much it. It's not a big, it's not a massive community. Like you can, like the load from player to publish designer with GMT is not that hard. You just need to you need to come up with a cool idea and do some work within the design community of GMT. You need to be able to put the time. But if you do this and you show that you can do the work, because like making a game design is like more endurance more than a sprint. But if you show that you can do this, then yeah, I guess you're in.
Yeah, the hard part is not really, getting past some kind of barrier that
Yeah.
GMT puts up. The hard part is you have to make something that plays. You have to make an actual game. I mean, we have 100 ideas. I was telling Fred that we've got one on the Discord that's marked, we came up with this in 2013 and we're still working on it. We're still thinking about it, because just the idea is much easier than actually making something that people will play and ask to play again. It's even, the thing for GMT that's nice is that they really care about finding people who are very interested in their topic. They care a lot about their topic. They are passionate about doing it correctly, passionate about presenting a viewpoint, and all of those kind of things. If you care about your topic and you have something that can play, there's going to be lots of people interested in that stuff.
I guess it's the same for a lot of creative spaces. Like the having ideas is not the difficult part. What's hard is actually making those ideas a reality. This is where it becomes hard. And we come back to the discussion we were having earlier about video game design. So I started with Pico 8 and I wanted to make a very simple game. And I wanted to make this simple Arthurian dating simulation. And I realized that every step of the way, I actually need to figure out a lot of things. So I have this general idea, but I need to be able to move my guy. The guy needs to collide on objects. I need to find a UI, and I guess it's the same. And you actually came from video game design, right?
Well, not like I didn't make any money on it, but yeah, that was the way that I liked to make games when I was a kid, because this was quite some time ago, but the computers in the lab and at the library all had BASIC on them. And in BASIC, I mean, BASIC is what Pico 8 is effectively built off of, this kind of idea of a very simple language that very simply puts things on the screen, and you have a minimal amount of space that you can work with. But building a game where you can get 4 people sitting around a keyboard and moving their little people around and shooting a big flamethrower or something, that's where I started making games. It was 30 years ago. It was a good time.
And did the transition feel natural from video games to board games, or did it feel radically different?
In a way, it's much easier building a board game than a video game. In the video game, you have to tell the computer what to do, and you have to be very, very precise. In a board game, you can kind of hang out with your friends and go, "What sounds right now?" But teaching a computer how to play a game, you really only have to do it once, and you can figure out exactly how the response is. Teaching a bunch of people to play a game, especially people you don't know, people where you might not be there, and as soon as we get into the complex games like Red Dust Rebellion, now the program that I might write for the computer and know that it works all the time, well, now it's a rule book that we're writing for human beings who are not going to all interpret it the same way. And language is very ambiguous sometimes, so it gets very tricky.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of the ideas of there's a lot of papers written about video games and about like aesthetics, dynamics, this kind of stuff, where why do we like playing this thing? What is the thing that makes it fun? And a lot of that kind of research, I think, carries over really, really well to board games, for sure.
So yeah, there are definitely some bridges. And then the natural next question is, you started with development. So you worked on Red Dust as a developer. And then you, I guess probably in parallel, but you started working more on design. How did the shift happen?
So I thought like a crazy person. I mean, this goes back to your talk about Red Flag Over Paris, right? I thought like a crazy person that GMT won't take my game unless I do something else for them first. Get myself a foot in the door, be the mailman or something for a little while, and I find that is totally not true. And I could have skipped this whole 5-year process, and it would have been great. Because I've had game designs in the works since for at least 15 years now, and some of those ones are games that I really want GMT to take a look at. I've been working on what became Echo since I think it's 2012 on the Discord, and I've got one that's a Napoleonic chip pull game that I've been working on for a long time. just a load of games. The thing that was really nice moving from developer, like official developer work to design work, is that I understand a lot more of kind of the sausage making process, and those pieces and the delays that they introduce and the different skill sets that are required for moving through them makes me a lot more patient as I'm waiting for P500 to show numbers, and as I'm waiting for the production queue to move through and to get assigned an art slot and that kind of thing. So it makes the process feel more comfortable for sure. And I got to meet Joe, and that's been amazing too. So.
And I guess now you have like more realistic expectations, because I think for a lot of people, especially coming through a process like the P500, it can be very frustrating because the filter is not necessarily the design itself. It's actually, for me, the filter is going through the P500, like being able to wait that long, continue to iterate on your game, doing the like receiving development feedback from people that are doing it for free, so it's very delayed, it's spread across the globe and everything, and I feel this is the real filter. So in a way, the fact that you were on the developer chair for the first one, I guess probably set more realistic expectations for what it was going to be when you were going to have your own game over there.
Yeah. And RDR specifically is a really good lesson in patience, right? We started working on it, and then the pandemic hit, and Jared Carmichael, the designer's personal life got really complicated for a little while. And then a whole bunch of things happened in the supply chain where if nothing had happened, I don't know, we could have gotten that game out in 2021, 2022 maybe. But with the world being nuts, that makes things really hard. I mean, the other tricky thing there is if we had gotten it out that early, would it be as good? Probably not. Having a little bit of extra time to work on things means that you can do a little bit more refinement. You can get a little bit more balance. I don't think we would have had Joe be able to work on solo if we were that early. Just a lot of stuff like that turned out to work okay. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I have a day job that means that I'm not really in a rush to get these things out. I'd love to get Echo out so that I can work on some of these other games and get them on P500. I kind of don't want to have two games on the 500 at once. I feel like that would make me feel very impatient very quickly. But
yeah, it's always tricky. I also feel like you're taking someone else's spot too. Like if you have multiple ones, and you're like, am I that legitimate to have two games on P500? So
yeah, exactly.
that's the thing. And yeah, so I can really understand the feeling that you have there. So what decided you to offer specifically Echo to GMT? Why this one? Because I guess you probably had like a lot of designers do a box full of ideas and half-baked project. What made you pick this one specifically? Why did you think that was a good proposal for GMT?
I'm not sure if it was a good proposal, but I was talking to Jason Carr about I've got 20 designs or whatever that I want to work on. Which one is going to be the easiest to get through the process? One of the big things that the P500 does for GMT is it gives them a prioritization order. It's not that you hit 500 and bam, we're going to send it to print. It's that the more orders you have on that list, the higher they should be prioritizing the publication of that particular game. And something that Jason had noted at the time, at least, this was a little while ago, about the 500 system was games from established designers, games in established series, games about established topics. Those tend to do a little bit better because people have some idea of what to expect. So, if I want to put out my North Africa in a half an hour card game, that is a very different beast to try and pass through P500, or my Napoleonic chip pull operational game that's a totally new series. Getting that through P500 becomes a lot more of a complicated thing than an established series. At the time, we were talking about Echo and Coin before ICS was really a big thing, and then moved it over because there was a lot of work done on this before we even went to P500. And then knowing that it's in Coin and knowing that we're doing Sci-Fi, which has gotten really good for GMT recently, we're kind of in a spot where we felt pretty confident that we could hit an order amount that would allow us to publish it at all. It's certainly been tricky. It hasn't done as well as I had hoped it would do, but I think we'll get to the point where we can at least print it, which is really all that you can hope for a first design.
How many orders are you at this point?
Somewhere around 650, I think. We should be able to hit 750 by the fall, is my hope.
Yeah, and I think that's decent. I think you have different types of game on P500, and you have some, and I believe that Echo is like this, where you don't have a big amount of pre-orders at release, but the more people try the game, talk about it, and everything, and you have a slow but steady pace of orders coming in, and I think you can be hopeful that if it continues like this, you're probably going to reach 1K or something like this. So that's, and yeah, I'll knock on wood.
Yes.
I hope it will get there. But maybe can you talk us a bit about the game, and I can bring TTS to the stream so you can actually show some components and explain some of the logics behind. And just for people to understand, this is playtest material, so don't expect this to be final art. So this is
yeah. I mean, this is much nicer playtest material than my home game.
Oh, it looks really nice. I didn't expect this. Like, I mean, compared to what I had on the thumbnail, it's not the same. It looks really cool.
Yeah, philosophically, I really don't want fancy components in my print and play game so that I can mess with it. But when we got the art for the sectors that looks like this, I couldn't help but put it into at least the TTS module because it's easier.
I can relate. Yeah, this is really nice.
So the bones of this thing are still coin. You know, there is a deck of cards that regulates play. There's a sequence of play where people choose options that other people can't choose. There's let's find one. There's a menu of operations that you can choose from. And when you do one on your turn, you're going to do recruit in a bunch of sectors or war in a bunch of sectors. And every so often there's a propaganda round, which in this game is an entropy round. And for that, you do a bunch of income and move around with things. There's population in this game, and it aligns towards various factions and can be neutral. You know, there's a lot of stuff here that if you're used to coin, you should find very familiar. But because it's a science fiction game and the scale is relatively large, there were some changes that kind of had to exist for it to work as a game, right? Science fiction is about progress and change and growth. And so we needed, like, one of the design goals here is to make sure that when you're coming up to a game, you could tell whether that game is in the beginning or the middle or near the end of play, which honestly, in a lot of coin games, like if you look at Cuba Libre can be really difficult to tell part of what stage of the game is, because that's just Volko's model for counterinsurgency, is that it's a big slog. But for a science fiction game about empire, it kind of doesn't work that way. So a lot of the system changes here are about how do we show change over time? How do we show that this thing is getting bigger over time? So one of the big things, we've got the big hex map that you have to have in a space game. I was like, I can't do a sci-fi empire game without a modular map. It's impossible. But everybody starts in one area near Seoul. So I don't have any art for Seoul, so it's kind of sad on the table right now. But Seoul always starts one step off of the center, and everybody starts with their pieces over next to it. So you know we're in early game if everybody's still clustered around Seoul in the phone booth. And as time goes on, they expand across the rest of the galaxy.
Yeah.
We also, the event deck, this is kind of a weird looking event deck tableau over here because every event in the deck is a technology. So in a way that like a lot of coin games have capabilities that you might spend a whole turn to grab. This game, you have technologies, and every turn you're going to flip a new technology over, and it's kind of a bidding situation for who gets to research that technology and who gets to use it. And since we have technology, if I gave everybody unique operations and unique special activities and all that kind of stuff, the complexity of the game spirals really quickly out of control. So every faction really only has like one special thing about them, one or two special things, and then everything else that's weird is coming from the tech. And so as you play through, just because of the way the math of deck combinatorics works out, you're going to play a totally different faction every single time you play. So we have tech is a big change. We have.
Can we have a look at one of the tech cards so we get an idea of what it looks like? Yeah.
These are. This is a random. Oh, it's just the first four because I haven't shuffled the deck. This is a good set, anyways, though. So we've got something like Arcbound Cloak. So when you research a technology, you put your pieces on that technology to mark that you've worked on it. So you're playing kind of an opportunity cost game in the auction. So if you've got pieces on this and your leader, like the meeple pieces, the ones that let you shift population towards your side, if your leader is going to get killed, you can pull a piece off of this to save the leader. So as you research, you're researching by putting a bunch of components on, and then you're going to yank some of those components off to use the tech. We have arcology design. The cache in this game is really tight.
I like it. I like when the cache is tight, so that's good.
Oh yeah, it's very well. We'll talk about salt in a bit, but yeah, you really need some money sometimes. The factions here are starting out with like 10 and 20 bucks, and a campaign where everybody acts on every turn could be 2 rounds. It could be 10 rounds. And so if you're going 10 rounds and you're acting on every turn and you have 10 bucks, you're going to need to find ways to take either free actions or to get money. And so this particular text says you can just yank somebody off of it to get 2 credits for each asteroid field. So you can use a tech. You can use one tech every turn. You don't have to take a special space on the sequence of play. You just have to have pieces available on it. So if you've researched this and you just need cash right now, just yank it and get it to happen. Construct is how you build fleets and star bases in this game. It also places new population on the map. So in the cloning vats one, normally you place independent, that's neutral pop. But if you have the cloning vats, you can place population that's like passively aligned to your faction instead, which is extremely powerful if you're a faction that cares about alignment. And then we got weird tech. This has generated a lot of arguments in my group about whether it's good or not. And I think depending on the version that you're playing, it can be really good or just hilarious. It's a copy of the top of the discard pile. So there's a lot of things that people will do that'll flip cards over to the discard. And as long as there's a card in the discard, yeah, I mean, I think that you'd like it a lot as a couple of play, the guild player especially. So if you have a bunch of pieces on Artificial Planning Engine, this is the one that has the head in a vat, I think, art in the setup. You just get to use whatever happens to be here. And this changes quite a lot. Like every time people fight, every time people move, a new card will show up in the discard pile for you to mess with.
That's really interesting. So what are the factions? Because you said, like, you didn't create a lot of asymmetry, but you made them slightly asymmetric, and then the asymmetry comes from, I guess, the tech that you developed during the game. But I'm curious about the different factions. Yeah,
so let's go to the start here. Actually, we'll do the Empire because it's kind of the government faction. So one thing that I wanted is a game that you could have different sets of factions in every time. I'm a big fan of Cosmic Encounter, and a big thing that makes Cosmic Encounter work is that you're playing with such dramatically different sets on the table. So I actually designed 12 factions, and Joe told me we should probably just do 8 so that we can make sure that we get the cream of the crop in the board in the game. So we've dropped 4 out. Maybe if it does really well, we can find a way to get those out later or make.
Yeah, that's more expansion material. I mean,
absolutely. Kickstarter stretch goals is what that is. So the big difference between factions is they have a setup change, because with a modular map, you need to do modular setup. So all the factions do a different setup. They all have a different victory condition. In playtest, we found that even just changing the victory condition was enough to make these factions feel super different in play. The other things is we have a special action, which is like, it is the one thing that your faction can do that makes it a little bit overpowered. And we have a passive effect. So for the Empire, the passive effect is how you get one of your victory tracks, which is on the player aid. So for TTS purposes, I have the whole PDF. I usually fold these in half in the playtest. On the back of it is going to be the bot, the non-player system, because every faction has a corresponding non-player bot that is not the same. They don't play the same rules. They don't have operations. They do a whole bunch of weird stuff. So we'll have to talk about that at some point.
And what's the player count like? Like, can you play, if you have 8 factions in the box, could you play up to 8 players around the table, or is there a limit?
We are only including components for 4 players. So all the factions use the same components. They all have cubes and population and star bases and that kind of stuff. And they all use them in a similar way so that they can stay interactive with each other. We play tested with 5 and 6 in the home game, and it was a little too slow for my taste. One of the things that we have to change if we wanted to do it was we'd have to extend the sequence of play a little bit so that everybody has a reasonable slot. And playing at 6 and having to worry about that, really, it just wasn't good enough for us to feel like it was worth the budget and the amount of wood that you'd have to add to the box. But if we threw an extra color in at some point and said that you can play 5, it works just fine. Some of the playtesting that I've done with Gary at work has been, lunch games where we play just 2 players, and it also works fine there too. So it's pretty flexible as a system. I think you're muted, Fred, or at least you're muted for me.
Oh, yeah, I'm muted. I was saying that's really interesting. So when you're playing 2 players, you're only playing 2 players. You don't need bots to play 2 players.
Technically correct.
Yes.
The thing that the thing that Joe and I were talking about for a long time is that a fun way to play? You can play 2 players with no other interference on the map, but it turns very chessy very quickly. And so one of the hopes for the bot system is that as you are playing a normal 2-player game, aliens and AI and robots and diseases show up on the map and pull out a new bot sheet from the set of unused factions. So you might see invaders from Andromeda show up in the middle of your game, and then after a couple of rounds, you've managed to kind of hold that off and reduce their strength, and then a new faction shows up that completely changes the dynamic. And being able to do that in the smaller player count games kind of adds enough interest and enough distraction that it feels a lot better, I guess, when you have a bit more chaos going on the map, for sure. The other thing that it allows us to do, as Fair's in the call, which I'm glad, because this is one of his things that he really wanted. It allows us to do a 2-player co-op game. So in most coin 4-player games, you have a way to play 2 players where you run 2 factions each, and really that's a cooperative mode for those. You're playing the solo for those 2 factions, and you can play it against an AI. In the bot system, the bots don't have a victory condition, but they do make it very painful for you to get to your own victory conditions. So setting it up so that, Sphere is going to play the Empire and maybe I play the Guild against bots that just show up as we're playing through makes it so we could really play this as a relatively co-op style format. We can't share technology, at least in the current co-op mode that we're working on, but kind of the core of it still feels like it's a good time. And then solo is a totally different experience, right? Because instead of playing solo with a fixed set of 3 others, you're playing solo against whatever the universe is throwing at you, which
is really great. It feels like you managed to bring in a very different dynamic to the game in that way, depending on the player count and how you want to play it, and that's really cool, I think.
I mean, it goes back to the problems of design in general, right?
Yeah.
I did not want to build a solo system that would have to understand how every technology in the game works because it sounds crazy, right? How do you choose which text to use? How do you choose when to use them? How do you choose how to use your resources? All this kind of stuff. It sounds like a nightmare. So I said, hey, what we'll do is we'll make a new bot system that doesn't play the normal game. It just plays its own game. And the big thing about that that's nice is it gives us a place to put aliens. I wanted all the factions to be humans. And if we have a place to put aliens, then now we can do really crazy things. There is a bot cockatiel that is currently built as kind of a body snatcher type of situation.
Nice. Very cool.
Where they'll replace your pieces if you've left yourself open to it. The bots are not in the TTS module because right now we're playing them entirely in person and doing a lot of testing that way before I want to release it to playtesters in general. It is pretty crazy how far you can push things before the system breaks. So I'm excited about it. But also, like, I play games with people that like co-op and I play games with people that like difficulty. And so tuning that to make sure that it works the way that we want it to we'll be doing it all the way up until it goes to print, I'm sure.
Yeah. Sounds super interesting and sounds very different. So that's really cool. I wanted to discuss a bit about maybe the influences. I'm going to remove TTS for now, and I want to start by gaming influences. So you talked, obviously there is the lineage with Coin because that's the DNA of the series, and then you talked about Cosmic Encounter. But were there other games? I mean, I see the layout. I see Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was thinking, what were your other influences? What you had in the back of your mind while designing this?
Yeah, Twilight Imperium is a huge one. The map is actually one smaller than Twilight Imperium, so things are going to be things are a little tighter, and you get into a fight a lot faster. Because that's one of my big complaints about Twilight Imperium. Space Empires 4X is a huge influence. I love that game. There's a lot of hidden stuff that goes on in there. And for a long time, there was a lot of hidden stuff in this too, but we couldn't make the complexity work. But it's still sitting there as a big influence. Dune is a huge influence for me as far as how can I make a sci-fi game where the factions feel different enough that the narrative impact of each individual faction and how you even want to play them at the table is a big deal. I think those are the big game influences for sure.
And the follow-up question is, it's sci-fi, and something that is really important to me is what are the literary influences that are behind the game?
Okay, so
I guess a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, I like to read. I'm a big reading fanatic. When I was growing up, we were out here in Washington. We lost power a lot, and it rained a lot, so we were just hanging out inside. And so I've read the foundation books. Like I've read all. I think it's 7 is the full series. I've read them several times, quite a few times. I've read all of the 6 Dune books that Frank Herbert wrote, like every year. I read a lot of sci-fi, but I think that one of the biggest influences on this particular game is the Foundation series. This idea that sci-fi can just be history through its slightly different lens. Foundation is really a story about the collapse of Rome in some sense. We've got Dune being about struggles over a major important resource. We've got Hyperion being kind of a story about belief. There's just a load of sci-fi. I bring up Ursula Le Guin whenever I talk about this kind of stuff, and especially what's the darkness? Man, I can't remember.
The Other Hand of Darkness?
Yeah, that's it. Because
it's an amazing book. It's yeah. it's completely fascinating. I don't think that enough people are talking about Ursula Le Guin, which I believe is probably the greatest, I would say, not necessarily sci-fi author only, because Earth and Sea is also pretty awesome, and she did. I think for me, she's more in the imaginary space. You could say,
Speculative fiction
yeah,
is,
exactly.
the way that's. If you haven't read Ancillary Sword by Anne Leckie, that's more modern sci-fi. That I love those books. Yeah, I mean, I could go listing books forever. The other crazy thing about this is that there's inspiration here from nonfiction as well. There's a book, Colonialism and the Birth of Science Fiction, or the Rise of Science Fiction, I can't remember. And this idea of where does the science fiction genre really come from at its core? And it's this idea of fiction about progress and fiction about discovery that has had a lot. I mean, there's things like Fallen London, or really old science. Frankenstein can be a science fiction, but lots of Europeans going and discovering backwards people type of science fiction that used to be the norm, and modern science fiction's reaction to a lot of those kind of things. Like, the nonfiction that I've read in this space is almost as big of an influence as all of the actual fiction. Like, I didn't want to make a game that was just Foundation with a bunch of eraser marks on it. I wanted to make something that evoked as many different science fiction takes as possible. Like, if you can go in here, I mean, we've got a faction, the Swords, that is like an accelerationist apocalyptic cult. And you can take them and go to Cthulhu, and you can take them and go to the Shrike worshippers, and you can take, there's a lot of themes that get explored in sci-fi a lot. And that's why I had 12 factions, was just grabbing 12 major themes and figuring out how would I model this in Coin.
And it's the same when you're, like the sci-fi writers operate in the same way. I mean, Asimov, I think it was like 15 years after Foundation, wrote his big book about the Roman Empire. Ursula Le Guin came from, I think, a family of academics. I think she was exposed to anthropology and stuff like this, and you can really see it in the cycle where the others. With cycle, the name of the cycle,
the Hainish cycle.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can really see it in it. So it's always good to feel like that there are like more like scientific, but in the large sense, influences when it comes to sci-fi. That's now I'm super excited.
It's fun to work on. Well, I mean, that's the thing about Coin as a system, right? The system is representing political dynamics that are not just military force, right?
Yeah.
And that's one of the big things that always bothered me about Twilight Imperium, is that there's no people in Twilight Imperium. It's 6 empires, and they're all smashing against each other. And the population on this planet it's 6 resources. That's it. That's all that it is. And if I invade your planet and bomb it to hell, and then now it's 6 resources for me, like all those people, they just flip, and there's no insurgency that's going to happen on this planet.
Yeah, that sounds off. Yeah,
it just feels really weird, Space Empires 4X at least has a way for you to drop Marines and stuff, but it doesn't really represent population. So I was like, well, can't we do something in that space? Which I
mean is crazy, because you've seen it in sci-fi as a literary genre, or like Ursula Le Guin, for example. The Name of the World is Forest is about insurgency. If you look even at TV, Deep Space Nine is something that happens at the end of an insurgency, and what happens at the end, like the process of reconciliation, the tensions around it, and everything. Like, it's something that has been explored a lot, but we don't see in sci-fi games. They stay very immature in a way, in the way they approach the theme.
I think a lot of it is that those sci-fi games, especially those particular influences, are coming out of the 4X game genre, right? The 4X game genre is relatively, I mean, there's asymmetries in all of it, but you're still playing the same kind of thing across the table. And I think that that's one of the reasons why I like Dune so much, is that at least something like the Fremen in Dune feels a bit more like an insurgency than, I mean, anybody in Twilight Imperium. So, I mean, it's such an interesting space to play in, but it also means that there's so much fun things that you could model. The constraints that I've set myself have made it very interesting trying to find where we can keep it from being just way too complex. You need to be able to understand what the person across from you can do in order to make a good move in the game. And if everybody's just wildly different, that becomes impossible. So how do you walk that tightrope has been a fun design challenge.
Yeah, I want to take some questions from the audience, and we have a question here from Arnaud, which I think is an interesting question, and it's very Herbertian of you to actually have made this decision. Why did you want all the factions to be humans?
I think so. I play a lot of role-playing games, and so I have people involved in story game development and design. And there's been a lot of discussion recently about this feels like a weird way to answer this question, but I promise it's relevant. About D&D using races and classes and saying, oh, this race is more powerful here, and this one's more powerful here, right? So if the factions that I design are, Alien Faction 1 and Alien Faction 2, and this one's stronger in this way, and this one's stronger in this way, it just makes me feel very uncomfortable, I guess, for a weird reason. Like saying that they're all human and that the major difference between them is that this one really cares about the population liking them, and this one cares a lot about making a lot of money. They don't need to be green and red faced aliens for that to work out, right? It also means that I can make all the humans have similar tools at their disposal. While one person might start out as the Empire with a bunch of force on the map, everybody's got the same set of pieces. And so the people that don't have very many pieces on the map, they could rise up and become massive over time. And we know that mass is really an empire at that point, even though they weren't at the beginning. Saying that they're all in the similar space as a people, I think is just more interesting to me than saying this person is stronger because they are lizard skins, and these people are stronger because they swim in the water or something. The other thing that's really nice about it is that it gives me design space with bots.
Yeah,
to go wild.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I think that's I really like this decision actually. And yeah, the design space that it opens up makes it a super interesting. We have a question here from Molotov Kokatiel, who's curious to know if you've played Space Core and if there is any comparison there. So
so when Space Corp, when the first proof copies came to GMT, I was at the weekend at the warehouse and I taught it to a group of people and loved it because it was so easy to teach. Like I hadn't played it before the weekend. Bringing it out and taking a look at that was amazing. And the story that John's telling in Space Corp is such a great story of progress, and that telescoping kind of situation is so amazing. As far as how my tech changes the game versus how John's tech changes, John has a stacked deck so that you can show a small tech in the beginning of the game and a large tech at the end of the game. But the way that my deck is built, I don't know if anybody here has played too much Coin. The deck's construction in this game is shuffle the cards and that's it. So there's no stacking, there's no ordering, you could get anything at any time, which means that it's harder to do big tech late and small tech early. So I can't do that much. But what I can do is show, the Empire starts with a bunch of pieces on the board and they kind of is nowhere to go but down for them unless they're really, really play a really good game early, I guess. And I get a lot of this out of the dynamics between the players, and a lot of it out of the dynamics of population on the map, which is, all of these interacting systems that change how things can go. But yeah, the technology itself, it's more that you have tech A, and then you get tech B, and then you get tech C, and the combination of those three puts you in a really powerful position, then that tech C is more powerful by itself.
Okay, that's really interesting. Great. I'm super hyped now. The wait is going to be really long, and I kind of hate you for it. You should have come later in the process on the show, so that's a bit annoying, but that's okay. The thing that I would ask from you as a last question, and as a way to give back, because you frustrated me. If you were to come back on the show and teach me a game that you think is underloved and deserved more attention, what game would that be?
Oh, that's so hard. I mean,
you can have multiple choices,
because I've got some of my favorite games in my office. And I mean, like, the obvious choice for me is Here I Stand, but that's also a very typical game to play on a stream.
Yeah, it's been covered a lot. I've played it a bit at conventions, so that wouldn't be. It's a great game. Don't get me wrong.
And I know,
but I don't think it's even
Maria.
adapted to the stream. Yeah, Maria, we've done.
Maria.
Yeah,
that's another big one for me. Yeah, I mean, it's so tricky, right? I don't know. I think I'd have to get back to you on that kind of stuff.
I mean, I haven't played Space Core.
And that's crazy.
Yeah, and I don't play much. I don't play much big sci-fi games. Like the only game in that space that I played a bit was Living Earth, which I really like. But it's one of the few games that I enjoy playing alone, because you're just in your own space, and you're just like figuring out your small formula to figure out what kind of charge you can throw away, and what you want to do, and how much risk you want to take. And it's something that you do on your own. You don't want to interact with anyone when you're doing this.
My group plays Leaving Earth in teams. And
but that would be fine. I would enjoy that. Yeah.
So
I would have. Yeah.
Space Core would be great. It's not a big space game. It's a very fast moving space game. And Space Empires. I would play Space Empires 4X. There's a co-op mode, and there's a team mode, and there's a 2-player. Any of those would be amazing. It'd be really complicated to do on stream, because there's like a spreadsheet of information in the background. And Unconditional Surrender probably would be another big one for me.
Yeah, I think so. Unconditional Surrender is something that I wanted to try for a while. It's a very different area of gaming than what we've been talking about, and I guess Space Empire 4X I played quite a bit, and I don't think that it fits well within a streaming format.
Sure.
Yeah, but I think that Space Core could be fun. So
OCS Sicily, I guess, would be another big one.
OCS already made promises to other people on the Discord server that I was gonna feature it, and we're gonna. I said, okay, we're gonna play it because it makes Stuart and Alexandre very happy. So it's gonna be covered. But if I can get you on for Space Core and Unconditional Surrender, that would be awesome. Yeah, and by the way, talking about the Discord server. So Discord server is the Homolidence Discord server. To get access to it, you just have to support the show on Ko-fi. I probably haven't put the link in the description because I forget most of the time. But if you look at any other video, you might find it because I always end up adding it in the description. One thing that you will find in the description, though, that I didn't forget is the link to the P500 page to Adam's game. So if you want to pre-order it, support the project, this is a great way to do so. And it sounds like a super exciting project. So just go there and put in a pre-order of this, so I can actually have the game as soon as possible. That's what I want. And I hope that you'll come back for Space Core and Unconditional Surrender. Let's plan for this. And if you don't want to miss Adam coming back, subscribe to the channel. And come back. That's really appreciated. I have this big objective for 25. I want to reach 10K subs. I don't think technically if I'm looking at historical data, it is impossible. But this is why I want to try, because it is impossible. And I want to do so by keep doing the things that I like doing. And I want to see how far can I push it. So I'm looking forward to fail. But I don't know. Who knows? Maybe a stream of Space Core and Unconditional Surrender could help me get there. But it was great to have you on, Adam. I don't think because we've interacted a lot on Discord and on Twitter, but via text and on. But I don't think we've ever directly talked before. I don't think so. Yeah, it was just great to actually even just have a chat. Actually, so it was really enjoyed that. So thanks again for coming over, and and oh, one thing that I wanted to say, because that was a funny story about how you came on here. Like there is always some discussions about people who would like to come on the show and things don't happen, everything. Just be like Adam. Adam just sent me a message at exactly the right moment. He felt in the ether that I was making my planning for the next 4 weeks, and he just sent a message at that time, and I had an open slot that I was trying to fill in, and Adam just said, you know what, let's do it. And so that's the thing. You want to be on the show, so send me a Discord message at exactly the right time, where I'm exactly in the right mind space. It happens 1 hour every 6 weeks. So just you just have to find it. But it was awesome. It was really awesome. And thanks everyone in the chat. People were super active and enthusiastic. So that was really, really nice to see. A lot of really good questions. So that was really awesome. Everyone have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll be back next Sunday. And what is happening next Sunday? I don't know. Did I announce something before already? I'm just checking my calendar to let you know what's happening next Sunday. Oh yeah, we're gonna be playing Paolo Mori's Battalion with Luke from Osprey. So that's gonna be fun. I quite enjoyed it. I had fun with Pocket Battles, but I was a bit frustrated by it. And when I got Battalion, I was like, oh, that's actually what I wanted from the game. It's a weird game, but we'll probably talk about it when we're gonna go live. But I must say, I'm happy to have it in my collection. Have you tried it or?
Not yet. I want to see it. It'll be good to see it next week.
Next Sunday we'll be playing it, and if everything goes well during the week, I should be releasing the second review that I recorded with Alexandre Fontaine-Rousseau while he was in France with me, and that is on Cuba's Splendid Little War. So if everything goes well, it will be out during the week. We had a lot of fun with it, and I think it's probably a game that has been released a while ago and deserves a lot of attention. Also coin adjacent in a weird way, so stay tuned, subscribe to the channel, and thanks again everyone for being here tonight. Bye-bye.